introduce myself. Thank you, Patrick, Dr. Zorro, Professor Zorro for the kind introduction. Yes, we've known each other for some time pre-pandemic. I kind of like life before pandemic. I met some people during the pandemic, and now I work at Vanguard. But yes, I've been involved with the Lehigh Masters in Financial Engineering program now for, I guess, 4 years or so. It's a wonderful program. First of all, I think you guys should be feel very fortunate to be in this program and having the guidance that you have from Professor Zorro and many of the other faculty members. I am one of the industry advisor for the program, so I do take very strong interest in your success. And of course, the program's success, right? It works both ways. I used to be a former academic before I joined the industry. Just to give you a little background, I joined the financial services industry now over 15 years ago, starting at Deutsche Bank. But prior to starting my career in the industry, I used to be an academic. I was a academic. I was a faculty member at a university in Michigan, teaching interdisciplinary subjects. I was based in the mathematics department, but I used to work with computer science, School of Finance, and so on. So it's always sort of such a nice feeling to be in contact with the students. Even after 15 years, I miss that very much. I know we only have 30 minutes, so I want to kind of use the time effectively to answer, Patrick, your question. Dennis and I are in the same company. He is working in the division called Investment Management, IMG, Investment Management Group. He also works in risk. He has a risk function. But I work in, so let me just kind of give you an idea of, so like any large company, right? You have multiple divisions, and I had a team that's called the Enterprise Model Governance Team. I'll explain what all that's about. I want to give you a flavor of what that is. It's ultimately a risk function dealing with model risk. But I roll into an organization which was set up very recently, just about 2 years ago, called CDAO, which stands for Chief Data and Analytics Office. And CDAO is sitting within IT, information technology. So I am heading a risk function, but we happen to be in the CDAO office, which is within technology. And I'll give you a flavor of how all that makes sense. And Dennis is kind of in a very kind of a focused on a particular kind of risk, which is investment risk. Even within that, there are a lot of specializations. And Dennis and I meet. I actually work out of New York, so I'm still based in New York. So I go down to my office in Malvern, Pennsylvania. How many of you know where Malvern is? You guys are in Lehigh, so all right. Wonderful. So that's kind of where our headquarters is, in that area. We have a beautiful campus there. Valley Forge, that whole area. But we also have presence in other locations, including Charlotte, North Carolina, Scottsdale, Arizona, Toronto, Canada, more recent, and also Dallas, Texas. This is just the North America, the US sort of North America footprint, but we certainly have presence all over the world, an international company presence in the UK, in Australia, in Canada as well. So, I actually mentioned to Dennis that I'm going to be speaking to the students there. And, if you would like to says something. He said, he says hi to all of you. And we always love to come and talk about our experience at Vanguard. So how does that sound? So I can give you a little bit of flavor of what I do
Maybe
now.
in 5 minutes, you could tell us exactly what is this model governance that you do, so they have a good.
Very good question, right? So model governance is about managing what's called model risk. Okay, what's model risk, right? So actually, maybe I don't even have to go back to the last financial crisis, the great financial crisis, 2008. The 2007-2008 crisis. Financial services, banks. We are an asset management or investment management company. Then you have non-banks. We have insurance companies, but companies in the financial services rely on models, financial models, and increasingly more and more models built using AI machine learning techniques. I think you must be aware of all the conversation and chatter going on around large language models, for example, LLM or generative AI. It's kind of the umbrella term. ChatGPT is an example. ChatGPT from OpenAI is an example. So models are being used all across Vanguard, not just Vanguard. I think this is a general statement that can be said for any financial firm. We are trying to, use models for ultimately deriving insights from data, right? As well as models for things like managing the risk, compliance. We have to comply with regulations that apply to us, such as regulations around preventing anti-money laundering or fraudulent, financial crimes. That's an example of a regulation. We have obligations to our investors, to our clients, fiduciary obligations, and we have regulations such as, we have, if there is a complaint against a financial advisor, these things have to be reported to regulators. Now, given the sheer amount of data that we deal with day to day, as you can imagine, to scale this, we have to rely on models, and we use modeling techniques to detect potential complaints. For example, it's a client phone call. Maybe we want to be able to route the client to the right department. How do you do it without hiring thousands and thousands of call center people, right? So we use a lot of sophisticated machine learning techniques for doing things like that. So all this sounds great, right? What's wrong with that? Well, models are not perfect. If you rely on models, like a completely, autonomous fashion, if there is no human in the loop, and the model doesn't perform as intended. So maybe I should say, even before getting to this point, models are simplifications. At the end of the day, when you model something, that means that you are trying to simplify, you make certain assumptions, you're trying to predict, forecast. You don't know what the true answer is, right? If the forecast, is part of the business decision, whether completely 100% or partially, if that forecast is wrong, that's going to have an impact. It could be something very, simple, like, we have models to forecast call volume, from clients. According to those forecasts, we want to hire people, or, come up with an optimal size. How many people do we need to answer the phones? Things like that. If we overestimate, what do you think is going to happen? Well, Vanguard isn't going to blow up, but there is a consequence, right? We hired more people than we need, right? So there is an impact. And if we don't hire, if we underestimate, then we're deluged with phone calls, potential customer complaints. We can deal with them. Then we got a problem on our hands. You know, it could be opportunity cost, there could be reputational cost, and so on. So what is governance about? So you need to have a framework to manage the risk of reliance on these models. And not all models will have the same kind of risk. So you need to have a very sort of thoughtful approach in how you build this type of framework. So my role is to build the framework. So on any given day, again, I'm speaking as myself, not on behalf of Vanguard. We get requests from all kinds of different lines of business who are very interested in exploring emerging technologies. And the word model may not even be on their mind. They say, well, hey, I want to use something like ChatGPT to automate customer support, or being able to answer questions, summarize information, going through like tons of documents and so on. What's wrong with that, right? Well, but if you rely on models that are outside the organization, you are going to have to interact with it, and potentially you can end up, well, for example, how many of you use ChatGPT? Is there anyone here who hasn't used ChatGPT? Maybe I should ask it that way. Or something like ChatGPT, that Google has barred. This is an area that's exploding so fast, so it's really hard to keep up sometimes. But it's a service, if you like, or a model. It's a large language model with billions and billions of parameters, right? But it's outside the organization. So when you interact with this, you're going to provide some information, so-called prompts. And if you provide what's called PII information, personally identifiable information, that has information about our clients, well, that's a violation. Or if we divulge information about our something of proprietary nature, let's say a software developer is going to use Microsoft Copilot to write some code for them, right? Or they say, hey, I wrote this code, does it have any vulnerabilities? ChatGPT, can you analyze this code for me? Well, we just provided that code to ChatGPT, which could train it, and inadvertently you have exposed proprietary information. That's one part of it. There's the information security part of it. But then the answer that you get, how reliable is it? Is ChatGPT always correct? If you were to use ChatGPT to do your assignments, by the way, I don't know what Lehigh's policy is around ChatGPT. Maybe one of you can tell me.
No, I mean, there's no policy per se. I mean, obviously you're not supposed to,
Right.
use it outside.
Right.
But I wanted to keep some times as well for students to ask you questions.
Sure.
But I thought it'd be interesting. I wanted Rodrigo to maybe update you. Because he completed the project on the multi-factor, and maybe Rodrigo, in 2 minutes or less, maybe you could update, and he's just for the sake of letting him know what you guys did. Although now it's being moved over to a SIEM, but I wanted Rodrigo to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So hi, my name is Rodrigo. I recently graduated from the program, so back in December, and I did take over the multi-factor investing project. I sort of inherited it with a different perspective than I took it. So basically, my idea was that factor investing was generally used in one of two ways. One, to maximize returns, and two, to minimize risk. And I figured there was a sort of a world in between those two for people that want to understand their risks, so better understand the risks and not necessarily maximize returns or minimize risk, but rather adjust their exposures to specific risk more accordingly. And I think I got this idea from the general, are we in a recession or not, or we are close to? I figured it would be interesting for people to understand where their portfolios are, how exposed are they to certain risks, and if they don't like those certain exposures, then how would one tweak said portfolio to better expose themselves to their targeted risks. So basically what we did was, in a nutshell, was that using optimization tools, and we based off the Dow 30 as a base sample universe, and we worked with the FAMA French 3-factor model. Eventually I extended it to 5-factor to see if that could change the methodologies of the model itself. But yeah, the general idea was that, and the general result is that there are definitely ways to tweak the allocation of a given portfolio to adjust for target risk exposures. But there are definitely limitations with what your inputs are, and I think that speaks a lot about something related to what you're talking about within model governance and understanding the features of your model and the inputs. So yeah, that I guess that's the direction project.
And I wanted to also, Majis, to hear from you, to hear for a different type of project from Jersey. Jersey, can you quickly give our guests a rendition of what is it that you're trying to do there with machine learning?
So right now we're looking at the Black-Scholes equation, and we're comparing the different moneyness values to see how it performs with different models such as linear regression, artificial neural network, etc. And we're looking at the mean squared error as the comparison result to see how the models perform. We've put the results into a heat map, and it appears that linear regression has a low error across the board, while the ANN has a low error only when the moneyness is greater than 1 or out of the money.
So what's the output of the model? What is the model predicting or forecasting? You mentioned Black-Scholes, which is used for option pricing, right? Pricing options,
Yes.
derivatives. So is this like a portfolio of equity derivatives you're working with?
Right now, we just generated the data for the Black-Scholes, so we haven't really applied it yet. It's more of,
Got it. Sounds very interesting. I was thinking, Rodrigo, your project sounds very interesting too. There is a lot of interest in, tilting to certain factors, like you want exposure to ESG, for example, more exposure to ESG, or you may ask the question, well, what is my exposure to certain?
That's the first idea. So people don't generally understand or know what their exposures are or their risks are. Right. So the first idea here is, okay, so people need to understand or at least get a better picture of where they are right now. And definitely ESG is one of the main topics that we discussed all along throughout the project, given its importance right now as an investment idea and factor and model itself. So yeah, definitely something to think about. Have you used ESG in your models as a factor or as an input or in